Welcome back. As you know, I'm Eli, the computer guy, here for the Daily Blob, where we ask the question, what happens to the modern capitalist world that is hyper-focused on investment when a technologically developed country goes all ethnic cleansing-y? I think this is kind of an interesting question. So I've been talking about Israel, not that much. I do have to say, I don't think I did an entire video about Israel last week, because, well, it's not that Israel didn't do anything stupid last week. My God, they did a lot of stupid crap last week. But I don't think it had a lot to do with technology, right? I've been talking about Israel a little bit, right? Because of the major investment that Intel was going to put into Israel, $20 billion. It was going to be one of the biggest investments in Israel history. And that got crap canned because Intel is in a death spiral. Well, as Gamers Nexus would say, we're not saying that Intel is in a death spiral, but if you look at a death spiral and if you look at Intel, they kind of sort of look the same. Anyways, I talked about that. I thought that was kind of interesting. Nvidia doing a tremendous amount of investment into Israel at this period of time. I've talked about it before. I was curious with Nvidia. Nvidia was doing a matching program like 2 years ago for the victims of the war, people could donate, and then Nvidia would match those donations. And so when the Israelis, when the Jewish folks donated to the Israeli causes, they got their donations matched. And when the non-Jewish people donated to the Palestinian causes, they got their money handed back to them. And I find this just kind of like fascinating, right? We've seen this in the technology world. All these jackasses, all these blue-haired jackasses over the past decade, right? Flying the flags, flying every flag other than the American one. Rainbow flags and pastel flags, Mexican flags, all kinds of flags they've been flying to prove that they're on the right side of history. And then what happens when one of your major clients just goes, ethnic cleansing-y, right? It's really easy to scream about the police forces in the United States from your comfy tech job. But what happens? What happens when your major client that's paying your company billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars goes all ethnic cleansing-y? All of a sudden, people are shockingly quiet. It's not, right? It's not as much as it was. Anyways, I find all this stuff kind of interesting, and it's curious to see how a lot of these things are continuing, right? I think it was last week, the Israelis are actually arguing that the Palestinians should be moved to like Somaliland. I think that's true. It's either Somaliland or Somalia. I'm sorry, that's a big difference there. Oh, that's right. Your family has been on this land for generations and generations and generations. Well, now you get to go to Somalia. Anyways, I think it's curious, right? And with Israel, one of the big arguments with Israel is they don't have iron mines. They don't actually have a lot because it's a not crap-sized country. But one of their big things is the tech industry, right? And the tech industry, right, is hyper connected into this whole world of investment. So much nowadays, so many times nowadays, we do not hear about the revenues of these companies, the profits of these companies. We hear about the investments into these companies, right? Whether they're startup companies or whether they're even larger companies, right? It's about the stock valuation. It's about the equity value, not necessarily the profit, which is its own stupidity. This is bad. This is bad all the way around. But here's an interesting question. What if you are a company in Israel, right? And you need the equity to maintain relevance, maintain actually even existing. And then your country decides that ethnic cleansing is just a good way to go, right? And then what happens when people just start pulling their equity investments out of the people that are associated with your country. Again, it's a fascinating thing. I think about this, right? When I was in the Army, one of the classes we had to go through was talking about one of their wars. I don't know, they got into a lot of wars. Anyways, one of the wars was actually kind of interesting because basically they were on one side, Arabs were on the other side. They just beat the shit out of each other for like a day. For like a day, they're just throwing lead back and forth. And at the end of that day, they were basically at a stalemate. The same amount of equipment was down, the same amount of people were down, the whole 9 yards. The curious thing, though, is with the Israelis, they had BDAR. It's called Battle Damage Assessment and Repair. Basically, it's the idea of what if you put your desktop support technicians in the field with body armor, right? So the tanks that had been damaged, the armored personnel vehicles that had been damaged, all of that kind of equipment that had been damaged, they sent out their support services to get that crap back up and running. And so the one side, their equipment was just down and they didn't do much about it. And then the Israelis, they came back in, got a huge amount of their equipment back up and running. And then the next day, they mucked the other side. When one side has all of their tanks or a huge number of their tanks and the other side don't, the other side gets crushed. I always think about that. All right, you think about that with modern warfare. What does modern things like modern war? What does modern conflict look like? We see this in Ukraine right now with drones, right? The whole idea of a $300 drone with a thermite grenade can take out a $3 million tank. That's an entirely different way of doing warfare. But the curious thing that very few people talk about is during the opening salvos of the wars after 9/11. One of the reasons that we were supposed to win, I still remember when we thought we were going to win those wars. Again, I will recommend maybe, I'm going to put this on the table, maybe if we issued our Marines pajamas, they might actually win some of these goddamn wars. I don't know. Maybe it's like the airflow, right? You got the BDUs on, you got all the equipment on, you're kind of sweaty and grody, and you're out in the field for God knows how long. Maybe it's like jock itch. Has anybody ever thought maybe the reason America keeps losing all of our wars against these pajama-wearing motherfuckers is because they actually have airflow down there? You give the Marines pajamas, and I'm just saying, maybe they would win a war. Anyways, the idea that we were supposed to win the war was because of our MBAs, right? It's very interesting. The whole idea of logistic systems, right? The whole idea that the military runs on its stomach. So basically, in order to have a viable military, it's not the bullets, it's not the guns, it's not the artillery shells, it's not the tanks, it's not the F-35s. It's can you feed them? Can you feed them? Can you give them cups of coffee, right? And so the idea is that the MBAs, we actually had the MBAs were the major power for the success of the American war machine. I'm just saying, I think they could have gone to Target. I'm pretty sure if they had gone to Target and they had ordered like 2 million pairs of pajamas, maybe 2025 would be an entirely different place right now. Imagine the timeline if every Marine in the field had been dressed in Iron Man underoos. I think in that time period, the world would actually be scared of us. Not so much anymore. Anyways, this is just a long, rambling thing to talk about now with Israel. So we have Israel. The value, one of the powers of Israel is their technology economy. One of the ways that the technology economy in the modern world works is through massive amounts of investment. The Israeli military is going out and murdering the shit out of Palestinians. I actually heard this from a couple of Israelis. This is hilarious. They literally say you can't call it genocide. You can't call it genocide. Wait for it. Because they're not killing Palestinians fast enough to shrink the population, right? The birth rate of Palestinians is higher than the murder rate of Palestinians by Israelis. Ergo, it's not a genocide. Fuck. Do these people listen to themselves? Dear Israelis, do us all a favor. Before you open your mouth, just go to a mirror, and like say what you're going to say into that mirror, and then ask yourself how it sounds. Is that really the argument that you're going to go for? So anyways, you have these technology companies, need investment, all of that kind of stuff. You have a military doing what the hell the military is doing. And so one of the interesting questions is what happens if the rest of the world is just fucking tired of these bastards shit, and they stop pulling their investment money. And this comes from, I do believe this is the Times of Israel. Yep, the Times of Israel. The Times of Israel. God bless these people. Division of the Daily Stormer. I am worried. Every time I come here and I talk about a Times of Israel article, I'm worried I'm going to get blackballed by YouTube by being the mouthpiece of the Daily Stormer. Because, right? Times of Israel is obviously a division of the Daily Stormer, right? Anyways, world's largest wealth fund rolls back Israeli investments over West Bank Gaza concerns. Norway's $2 trillion body said it is divesting from 11 out of 61 Israeli firms, reviewing other investments. Country's finance minister praises fund for acting quickly. So a $2 trillion fund is now pulling their investments out of Israel. And this is one of the things I talk about with macro forces. Like if you have a startup company, if you have any kind of business, right, money comes in, right? Your landlord does not give a crap where your money comes from. Honestly, doesn't. If you're selling all of your employees' bungholes out behind the 7-Eleven, look, as long as your check comes in before the due date, your landlord doesn't care. Revenue, profit, investment, bunghole, they don't care. But you do need that money. And that's one of the curious things, especially what's going on in the wider world right now, is what happens when these funding mechanisms start drying up. And then we start thinking about things like inertia, right? The first sovereign wealth fund to pull their investments from Israel, that's a big, scary thing. But there's one thing that we've learned from Elon Musk, is as soon as one jackass does something in this modern world, everybody else decides it's fair game. It's something to do. So one of the things to consider here, right? If you're running a business, if you are an employee for a business, that might be tangentially related to whatever the hell is going on in Gaza. What happens if a tremendous amount of money just walks the fuck out the door? And this is something that we need to be concerned about here in the United States. Again, talking about Intel. Intel trying to put $20 billion into an ethnic cleansing type country. Nvidia doing major amounts of AI investment into Israel. So I'm sure they can use LLMs to do dirty jokes, right? That's what the IDF is gonna do. The IDF is gonna ask LLMs for jokes, right? That's why they're worried about artificial intelligence. We have Microsoft. Microsoft, a tremendous amount of money, right? I talked about that department, whatever, 8002 or whatever the hell it is, right? Basically siphoning all Palestinian voice traffic into Azure data centers so they can listen to whatever the hell they want, because they don't give a fuck about human rights. Again, right? You only have to worry about human rights when you're dealing with humans. They ain't human. Ergo, you don't got to worry about human rights. And I'm curious, like how these kind of dominoes will play out, right? We see this like with Canada right now. So many people in Canada, right? Are they really boycotting the United States? Or do they just not want to buy our shit? Like when you talk about like boycotts are a big thing. We're boycotting. But think about it, there's boycotts and then they just walk in the grocery store and saying, I just don't want to fucking buy Wheaties. Right? You walk in the grocery store, you see a box of Wheaties, and it just kind of makes you nauseous. Is it a boycott to not buy Wheaties? Or is it just being fucking exhausted, the bullshit the United States has been pulling for the past God knows how many years, right? And it's kind of interesting to be thinking that way. Like how does this start affecting like the global economy with all of the connectivity that we have up until this point in time? Let's see here. Norway's $2 trillion sovereign wealth fund, the world's largest, said Monday it was selling off its stakes in some Israeli companies and terminating all contracts with Israeli asset managers handling investments over the situation in Gaza and the West Bank. Quote, "We are invested in companies that operate in a country at war, and conditions in the West Bank and Gaza have recently worsened. In response, we will further strengthen our due diligence," the fund's CEO, Nikolai Tangent, said in a statement. Norges Bank Investment Management, the body managing the fund, said it is divesting itself of 11 Israeli companies out of 61, which are not included in an equity benchmark index created by Norway's finance ministry. The fund has said the 11 were excluded, quote, "due to unacceptable risk of contribution to serious norm violations associated with business operations in the West Bank." Going forward, quote, "the fund's investments in Israel will now be limited to companies that are in equity benchmark index," it said. The statement noted that it has raised issues with 39 companies since 2020 over concerns pertaining to the West Bank and Gaza, marking the majority of its due diligence related to conflicts around the globe. It said that monitoring Israeli companies was intensified in the autumn of 2024, and that, quote, "as a result, we have sold our investments in several Israeli companies." NBIM also said that all investments in Israeli companies managed by external managers would be moved in-house, and that it was, quote, "terminating contracts with external managers in Israel." In addition, NBIM said Norway's finance ministry had asked it to review, quote, "its investments in Israeli companies and to propose new measures that it deems necessary." Norway's wealth fund, also known as the oil fund, as it is fueled by vast revenue from the country's energy exports, is the largest in the world with a value of around $1.9 trillion with investments spanning the globe. In the last year, the fund sold its stake in an Israeli energy company and a telecoms group over ethics concerns, and its ethics watchdog has said it is reviewing whether to divest holdings in 5 banks. Also on Monday, Norwegian pension fund KLP said it had excluded Israeli company Next Vision Stabilized Systems, quote, "from its investments because the company supplies key components for military drones used in the war in Gaza." So there we go. Norway's sovereign wealth fund is pulling back from Israel. Now, to be clear, it is 11 companies out of 61, but it is 11 companies out of 61. And the question is this a one-off? Is this a one-off? Is this Norway kind of flexing and doing the white knight thing? Or is this one of the dominoes that starts to fall to knock out a hell of a lot of other dominoes? As I've said before, when the Israelis hear this, right, I'm too stupid. The Israelis keep telling me I am too stupid to talk about Israel, right? By God, my country better hand over the money and weapons. I am too stupid to question why my country is handing my money and my weapons over that shithole. But anyways, right? But the point that I try to make out with this is it makes people like me fucking nauseous. The fact that our money, our supplies, everything that is going to that gnat crap sized country makes me want to vomit, right? It degrades my own country in my eyes for helping this god-awful ethnic cleansing regime. And so the question does become, when you start seeing stuff like this, how far does that go? And then what happens to Israel? Israel keeps acting like they're fucking Russia. Like, it's weird. Like I've talked with Israeli soldiers. Fuck being an Israeli soldier. That would suck, right? Their country is so fucking small. Their country is so fundamentally difficult to defend. The reason they've been able to defend that country as long as they have is because of the incompetence of the folks around them. It has much more to do with incompetence around them than it has to do with their success most of the time. And you just think about it. What happens when the support stops? Right? Netanyahu said, if we have to fight with our teeth and nails, we will. And I know that sounds good. That's what a macho man says. That's what a fucking alpha dog says. Is that what a human fucking says? When the people that support your country, that allow your country to survive, are telling you what you're doing is fucking god-awful and violates every moral concept that we have. When you sit there and continue to beat your chest, is that the wisest of decisions, right? You have been able to blockade the West Bank, right? And that ass-sized country has been able to blockade an even smaller chunk of land. How hard would it be to blockade Israel? I don't know. I think it's kind of curious to take a look at and see what's going on. And this is the kind of thing you have to be thinking about, you know, again, from that macro world view of what happens when people's opinions start changing. This is a thing that I worry about, you know, as an American, is, you know, all politicians at the end of the day, they have to answer to their own citizens, right? That's not exactly shot, right? Like when Democrats don't understand the concept of America first, I do wonder how stupid they fundamentally are, right? Are they drinking the blue hair dye? It's not Gatorade. You put it on your head. You put it on your head, not in your mouth. Anyway, but that's basically how politicians should operate. You know, France first for the French, Germany first for the Germans, right? Turkey first for the Turks, America first for the Americans, right? And so it's curious, right, to be thinking about as the worldview around Israel changes, as the worldview around the United States change, what changes are going to be demanded by other people around the world, right? That whole idea of can they continue to stomach economically supporting people that don't see them as people. It's the whole thing like with Trump, right? Trump getting out of NATO, I'm all for getting out of NATO, but he's talking about sending troops into Greenland, right? Trump is literally talking about slaughtering Europeans just to prove something on the nightly news. If you're a European, how much money do you want to be sending our way? How much money do you want your sovereign wealth fund to be sending our way so that we can fund our F-35 program, so that we can kill you if our diet coked out president decides he wants to? And what happens to all the businesses along the way? I'd be curious to see. So what do you think about this? What do you think about Norway pulling funding, at least from a number of Israeli companies? What do you think about them pulling back on the investment? So basically not having local investors, investment houses or whatever in Israel purchasing the investments, but pulling that in-house, right? That strips money out of the financial market in Israel. What do you think about the dominoes falling in this particular matter? And where do you think they end up in 5 or 10 years? I don't know. Put your thoughts down below. Give us a thumbs up. Give us a thumbs down. Say I'm amazing. Say I'm horrible. Say I'm horrible. Just do it down below. Because remember, in the world of YouTube, all that matters is that interaction. With that, see y'all later.